Today, let's talk about the situation in northern Myanmar. Over 20 days ago, conflict suddenly erupted in this region. This place is somewhat reminiscent of China's Beiyang government era, characterized by warlords and years of incessant and chaotic warfare. Additionally, the involvement of the Chinese means that as soon as fighting broke out, it immediately attracted widespread attention from international media. As a result, I received a lot of messages asking, "Director Wang, please talk about the situation in northern Myanmar." But why haven't I talked about it? There are several reasons for this. Firstly, when the war just started, many aspects of the situation seemed chaotic and unclear. Secondly, there are no direct reports from international news agencies in this awful place, so most of the news sources are indirect and secondhand, making it difficult to distinguish if information is genuine or not. Thirdly, recently there have been numerous significant events non-stop, from the death of Lee Keqiang to the APEC meeting. These news stories are more important and directly connected to us, so I couldn't cover everything, including the news about northern Myanmar. However, I have been closely following the situation over the past half-month. Yesterday, I suddenly saw a news report stating that public security agencies from all over the country have gone to Linkang, Yunnan, to apprehend con artists from their place of household registration.
Police from all over the country have gone to Linkang, they say, traveling thousands of kilometers to bring back failed entrepreneurs. Yellow vests, red vests, blue vests. Now Linkang is filled with all kinds of detainee vests. Each region's color is different. Policemen from various provinces took this as an opportunity to have a big gathering. This is a rare scene, only seen once every few decades. All thanks to these little vests. It's tough for the people in Yunnan. These last 2 months, if you want to take a high-speed train, you have to get squeezed in alongside a bunch of scammers. Giving them a couple of kicks isn't overdoing it, right? They deserve it for being scammers. For 100 years, Spring City was unheard of, but overnight it became famous across the nation. The police from Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia never imagined. Their first trip to the southern border of the country would be to carry away convicts.
These con artists were extradited from northern Myanmar in large numbers. There were several thousands of people. When I saw this news, I felt that the trajectory of this incident in northern Myanmar was gradually becoming clear. So we finally can begin to discuss this topic. Since there's nothing major happening today, let's talk about northern Myanmar. The conflict in northern Myanmar this time began on October 27th, initiated by Peng Deren, the son of Peng Jiasheng. Peng Deren is the leader of the Kokang region, commanding an army of 7,000 Kokang Alliance troops, spread across 3 brigades. So what exactly is the Kokang Alliance Army? In fact, Kokang means Han Chinese, which is the predominant ethnic group in China. In the northern part of Myanmar, due to the complex ethnic relations, many ethnic groups have blood ties with those inside Chinese territory, such as the Jingpo, Dai, and Wa ethnic groups. The Kokang people are Han Chinese located within Myanmar. Peng Jiasheng, Peng Deren's father, was an early leader in the Kokang region but was driven out by the Myanmar government forces more than a decade ago. As a result, Peng Jiasheng wandered around northern Myanmar and spent some time in the area of his son-in-law, Lin Mingxian. Lin later gave him a few hundred guns, and with these, Peng returned to the mountains of the Kokang region, biding his time to develop his armed forces and hoping to make a comeback. He has lost control of the Kokang region for 18 years already. Last year, Peng Jiasheng passed away, and his son, Peng Deren, succeeded his military authority. On October 27th this year, Peng Deren's Alliance Army suddenly descended from the mountains.
Comrades, entrusted by the party and the people, the military commission orders, to resolutely defend the interests and safety of people's lives and property, to take strong measures against illegal and criminal activities. Our mission is to eradicate telecom fraud, eliminate drugs, and rescue compatriots. Comrades, do you have confidence?
Yes.
Let's set off.
The Myanmar government forces did not take the Kokang Alliance Army seriously, as the alliance is just a lightly armed guerrilla force. Initially, the Myanmar government forces dispatched a reorganized division from the south to deal with the alliance. However, unexpectedly, this division was reportedly almost wiped out by the Kokang Alliance Army within half a month. This attracted widespread media attention. How did the alliance achieve this? Later, it was discovered that the alliance had found a large cache of weapons and ammunition in the jungle. What kind of weapons? Huge drones and anti-tank weapons. It was also discovered that they not only found these weapons, but also gathered instructors and political commissars. These commissars and instructors must be from the Chinese military. Thus, the combat capability of the alliance was greatly enhanced. Think about it. What can tanks even do now? A drone flies over, drops a bomb underneath it, and the tank is done for. Even their artillery positions were wiped out by drones. As a result, this reorganized division of the Myanmar army was completely defeated. International speculations arose that the Alliance Army might have been rearmed by the Chinese Communist Party, launching a proxy war. This was the main issue of international media attention during the early stages of the war. Before answering this question, let's first talk about the complicated historical background of Northern Myanmar. In my view, Myanmar is one of the world's notorious failed states. Now, what do I mean by a failed state? The state had no capacity for governance and lacked any development. For 80 years after the end of World War II, this country has been constantly engaged in a civil war. Everyone knows that the Myanmar government is a military government, and every time they appoint a few civilian officials, within a few days, they are dismissed. The military also doesn't properly manage the country. Everyone knows that during World War II, China had a Chinese expeditionary force in India, which fought its way back to Yunnan, China through the Burma Road. One of their stations was in northern Myanmar, in a city called Mandalay. Mandalay's train station was the site of a famous battle between the Japanese and the Chinese expeditionary force. I read a report that said a few years ago, someone visited the Mandalay train station and found bullet holes from the battle still there. What does this tell us? It shows that the country hasn't developed in 80 years, and the remnants of war from 80 years ago are still there. So Myanmar is really problematic, especially the northern part, which is even more complicated. The situation in northern Myanmar is more complex because historically it was under the administration of Chinese Tutsi. But in the 19th century, the British arrived in Myanmar and took control, turning it into a British colony. They expanded their influence and drove out the Chinese presence from northern Myanmar. After Myanmar's independence post-World War II, the Myanmar government wanted to inherit the territory left by the British colonists. However, the northern Myanmar region continued to push for independence, arguing that it had never been under the Myanmar government's rule historically. Therefore, an agreement was signed between the two parties, granting a high degree of autonomy to the regions in northern Myanmar. An event occurred during this period, the conflict between the nationalist KMT and Communist Party in mainland China. After being defeated by the communists, remnants of the KMT, led by General Lee Mi, retreated into Myanmar. The Myanmar government, displeased with the intrusion of a foreign military force, attacked Lee Mi and his troops. Although the KMT forces were unable to defeat the communists in China, they defeated the local warlords and the Myanmar government forces around them like it was child's play. Consequently, Lee Mi established an anti-communist base in northern Myanmar, setting up schools and relocating families there. In the 1950s, they even attempted to retake Yunnan, capturing 8 counties before being quickly defeated once again. This incident gave rise to a very negative international perception, as it involved a national military taking refuge in another country. Pressure was put on the KMT government in Taiwan, leading to most of Lee Mi's forces returning to Taiwan via Vietnam in 1954. However, a significant number remained in northern Myanmar, laying the foundation for the first warlords in the region. In the 1960s, another significant event took place. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, began to support its own version of exporting revolution as Chairman Mao broke ties with the Soviet Union and believed that his Mao Zedong thought was the essence of communism. The CCP supported communist movements in Asia, including in India, Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, encouraging them to study Mao Zedong thought and adopt the strategy of encircling cities from the countryside to seize power. The Communist Party of Burma, CPB, received support from the CCP at the time. The CPB's base was in northern Myanmar, backed by China, making it easy to receive financial and material support. The CPB controlled 4 major military regions, divided primarily based on ethnicity, with the Kokang region, Northeast Army, being one of them, led by Peng Jiashing's group. During China's Cultural Revolution, many young intellectuals, inspired by the Global Revolution, went to Myanmar to fight guerrilla warfare for the Burmese Communist Party, attempting to overthrow the Myanmar government. Many died abroad in a foreign land, which was quite tragic. After China's economic reforms, the CCP ceased support for other countries' communist parties, leaving the CPB without financial backing. At this point, the Kokang region under the CPB started to engage in illicit activities, turning to drug trafficking. After acquiring wealth from the drug trade, the CPB started wondering how the Kokang region suddenly had money. Upon investigation, they found out that they were performing opium cultivation and processing to make money. Facing a dead end, the CPB established an office called Project 819 to formalize the drug industry, including cultivating opium and the setting up drug processing plants. It is said that during its peak, they controlled 70% of the global drug trade, making the Golden Triangle famous worldwide. In 1989, the 4 major military regions rebelled and completely eliminated the CPB. These military regions then signed agreements with the Myanmar government, maintaining a high degree of autonomy in northern Myanmar. They agreed to follow government orders under normal circumstances and receive salaries, but would not be deployed by the government except in cases of national invasion. The Myanmar government also refrained from sending officials to the region. However, after signing the agreement, the government still sought opportunities to reclaim the autonomous regions of northern Myanmar. In 1992, they first targeted the Kokang region, as Peng Jiashing's forces were relatively weak. After being driven out of Kokang, Peng Jiashing sought refuge with his son-in-law, Lin Mingxian, who provided him with weapons. Peng Jiashing then returned to the Kokang region to continue guerrilla warfare. Another factor in the background is the drug trade in the Golden Triangle. China was also deeply affected by it, leading to Chinese pressure on the region to cease drug production. The hope was that they would adopt alternative crops to cultivate instead of engaging in the drug trade. In the early 2000s, drug production and trade in northern Myanmar gradually declined. China Central Television's Focus Report program even did a special episode in northern Myanmar, encouraging locals to switch to alternative crops and stop cultivating opium, suggesting that they could maintain their livelihoods through other agricultural products. However, considering the profitability of drugs, which can be hundreds or thousands of times more valuable than crops, this policy promoted by the Chinese government was not particularly successful in northern Myanmar. There was a brief period of decline in drug activity, but soon after, telecom fraud emerged as a new criminal enterprise. Once telecom fraud became prevalent, northern Myanmar quickly became involved in these activities. Because the scams mainly targeted Chinese people, and they were close to the Chinese border, the region became a hub for telecom fraud. In other countries, telecom fraud is conducted covertly, but in northern Myanmar, due to its lack of government regulation, it was done very openly under the name of network economy businesses. Many people are aware of my previous podcasts about scam promotions on social media platforms like Twitter. Most of these scammers behind the scenes are unrefined individuals based mainly in Myanmar, with some in the Philippines. The rise of telecom fraud in northern Myanmar led to significant economic growth in recent years. The area was even dubbed Little Hong Kong, with local prices on par with Hong Kong, due to the lucrative nature of telecom fraud. According to Chinese data, since 2000, China has increasingly become a victim of telecom fraud, with annual losses amounting to several hundred billion yuan, a staggering number. Following Peng Jiashing's departure from the Kokang region, 5 major families slowly emerged, including the Bai family and the Liu family. The most prominent is the Ming family, led by Ming Xuechang, a Han Chinese native of the Kokang region. Initially involved in drug trafficking, they shifted to telecom fraud in recent years. They operated a famous telecom fraud industry complex called the Crouching Tiger Villa, which reportedly housed at least 1,000 telecom scammers. Some were kidnapped, others deceived, and many came willingly. They spent their days inside, sending messages and making threatening calls to people in mainland China. These families made huge profits from telecom fraud. In other countries, no one would dare to engage in telecom fraud so blatantly. According to those running telecom fraud companies, each company's daily financial turnover was in the millions. Imagine how much money these groups altogether made annually. In recent years, when the Chinese government sought to combat telecom fraud, they signed agreements with neighboring countries, including the Philippines and Cambodia. However, Myanmar was a special case because even signing agreements with the Myanmar government was futile. as they had no control over the region. Earlier this year, there were reports that the Chinese government pressured these major families in Myanmar to crack down on telecom fraud. 2 families cooperated and handed over some individuals, but others did not. They believed the Chinese government couldn't do much to them, especially the Ming family, which was incredibly barbaric. On October 20th, when they heard the crackdown was intensifying, they attempted to move the people in the Crouching Tiger Villa. This led to a conflict, during which they immediately began killing people, resulting in the infamous October 20th massacre. Reportedly, 4 undercover agents from mainland China revealed themselves as police officers and were buried alive by the Ming family's people. That day, a total of 70 people were killed. This incident caused a stir. Shortly after Peng Jiasheng's forces launched their campaign, several bodies were found in the sewers under the Ming family's house. These bodies were identified as some of those killed at the Crouching Tiger Villa, infuriating China. Some analysts suggest that under these circumstances, the Chinese government encouraged Peng Deren and his Kokang Alliance Army to sweep through the region. The implication here is that since neither the Myanmar government nor the local families in Kokang heeded China's warnings, China took matters into its own hands. Thus, the Kokang Alliance Army, eager to reclaim their territory and recover lost ground, began their campaign. Their declared goals politically aligned with China's interests.
Our objectives are to reclaim our historical territory, to rescue all oppressed people in northern Myanmar, and to completely eradicate telecom fraud in our jurisdiction.
Under these circumstances, the Kokang Alliance Army launched the Northern Myanmar campaign. There are a significant number of Chinese elements in this army. Peng Deren is now studying books on Xi Jinping's governance daily, and the smartphone he uses is the latest Huawei model. Consider where he could possibly obtain the latest Huawei smartphone in such a remote area. This leads many to speculate that these are forms of support from the Chinese government. Now, it appears that the situation is becoming increasingly clear. Under the pressure of the Kokang Alliance Army and the Chinese government, the major families in the region are nearly falling apart. The Ming family, in particular, has been targeted by an international arrest warrant issued by China. A few days later, Ming Xuechang died, leading to speculation that he might have committed suicide out of fear of punishment, hoping his death would protect his family. However, his children were also arrested and handed over to Chinese police. In recent days, a large number of scammers from Myanmar have been extradited to China. After this current round of warfare, the situation in northern Myanmar might undergo a dramatic rearrangement. The Kokang Alliance Army, led by Peng Deren, could potentially recapture Laokai. Current battle reports suggest that they are already nearing Laokai and could soon take control of the area. Regarding this military campaign in northern Myanmar, my view is that Myanmar is a failed state. Such a failed state has become a gathering place for criminals in the modern international society. Everyone knows about Somalia. Why are pirates rampant there? Because the Somali government is completely ineffective and has no capability to govern. A government's capability includes 2 aspects, foundational and authoritative. Foundational capability refers to effectively managing the country, and authoritative capability relates to the extent a party or leader can exert control over others. For instance, Myanmar's government is authoritarian, opposing democracy and arresting leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi. But their foundational power is weak. They lack the ability to govern the country. Thus, northern Myanmar has become a lawless area similar to Somalia, and the proliferation of telecom fraud in northern Myanmar has been a serious threat to society. In my opinion, it is justified to strike against such places. The Myanmar government neither intervenes nor can they, and the local warlords and tycoons rely on such illegal activities for their livelihood. Therefore, I believe attacking these areas is justified and valuable. This time, under the pressure of the Kokang Alliance Army, several thousand telecom scammers were extradited to China, which is a significant achievement. Combating telecom fraud can involve high-tech methods like freezing bank accounts, but scammers have turned to cryptocurrency for transactions, making it difficult to intercept. Still, the most crucial step is to destroy the fraud hubs. Hence, attacking northern Myanmar is important. That's the first point. Secondly, how do we view the Chinese government's involvement in this kind of proxy war in Myanmar? I think it's a supportable approach. Considering the number of ordinary people devastated by telecom fraud, appropriate measures must be taken. China cannot directly deploy troops there, as it would involve sovereignty issues with another country. But if it were the United States, they might have sent troops directly. Allowing the Kokang Alliance Army to lead the attack with covert support seems acceptable. But is there a better way? Probably not. By using this method to take control over the area, regardless of how the warlords are dealt with in the future, as long as the telecom fraud issue is resolved, the objective is still achieved. For the Chinese government, the primary goal is to eradicate telecom fraud. Lastly, can this method completely eliminate telecom fraud? It might be difficult, but it certainly is effective. I've noticed that since the Northern Myanmar operation, the number of scams and spam on my Twitter has significantly decreased. At its peak, each of my tweets would attract dozens of scam and spam replies, which was extremely annoying and led many people to fall victim to scams. But since the crackdown in Northern Myanmar, my Twitter has become much quieter, with a noticeable reduction in scam and spam replies. This shows that many of these spammers were indeed from Northern Myanmar. Still, everyone should remain cautious and avoid being scammed. But even with the destruction of these hubs in Northern Myanmar, these individuals will likely find new methods and locations. Currently, overseas telecom fraud is concentrated in countries with less robust legal systems or other failed states. While the Golden Triangle was ideal for its lack of regulations, other countries might not be as suitable, but scammers will still find places like the Philippines, Ukraine, and now Dubai, which is becoming a new hotspot for Chinese telecom fraudsters due to its relatively lax legal system. As long as these kinds of countries exist, telecom fraud will continue to thrive in these regions. However, dismantling the Golden Triangle and the current operation in Northern Myanmar has significantly positive impacts in the fight against telecom fraud. Therefore, in today's program, I want to objectively support the Chinese government's efforts to combat telecom fraud and hope for its early eradication, which I think is beneficial for the country and its people. Thank you for listening. That concludes today's discussion.
同志们，向党和人民中统军委命令，坚决维护人民利益和生命财产安全，严厉打击违法犯罪活动。我们的任务是铲除定价，消除毒品，解救同胞。同志们，有没有信心？出发！